Strawberries are a really easy and extremely hardy perennial crop to grow in your food production systems. Yeah, they do take up some space and they don't produce food all year round, but once you have them established in your food production areas, they just keep on going. They just reproduce themselves really, really easily. And that is something I really love about having strawberries in my garden beds, especially a type of strawberry called the Alpine strawberry or a woodland strawberry. Those are my favorite kinds to grow. So today we're going to talk about strawberries. This growing season, I have decided to put my garden strawberries, so those are the red strawberries that we're accustomed to see, the big red strawberries that you buy in the supermarket or grow in your garden. So garden strawberries, I've decided to give them their own garden bed here. Now, I've tried to put them different places around the property, but they just weren't quite tenacious enough to fight the weeds and the chickens to get really well established. So I decided I needed a different strategy. I've given them their own garden bed to get them well established, and so I can get lots of plants from them to start putting out in different places. But the thing I love the most about strawberries is how they just keep on going, and there are different kinds. Now, a lot of people haven't run across the woodland strawberries, which are often called Alpine strawberries, and these are sort of the original strawberries. So way back in ancient times and through to the Middle Ages, whenever you see a reference to strawberries, those are the strawberries that people are talking about. They're talking about these little tiny strawberries, and I have the kind that is a white or a sort of creamy color, but you can also get red ones, and they are super hardy, and I really enjoy that about them. So what I do with those Alpine strawberries is I whack them in to all my garden beds, and they just grow in the borders. They grow just scattered about everywhere. So in here, I've got them tucked around the borders of my regular big garden strawberries. So I like to scatter the Alpine strawberries just out amongst all the different garden beds that I have. Now, I'll show you the difference in size between a garden strawberry and an Alpine strawberry, because Alpine strawberries are quite small. So this is kind of quite a regular size for them to be here, and they can be bigger, but they are a small strawberry versus your nice big garden strawberry, which can be quite large. So these ones are definitely going to fill your harvesting basket a lot quicker. But I don't grow the Alpine strawberries for a giant harvest of strawberries. It's not really what they're for. What they are for is filling in space with a very tenacious, hardy, easy to manage plant that can just hang out and do its thing, and I don't have to worry about it. In my food production system, the chickens are an integral part of what I do, but chickens like to gobble up crops, which is of course why all my garden beds are protected. But they're protected with a netting that the chickens can peck through if they want to. And that's important that the netting is wide enough, because the bees have to be able to get in to pollinate. So it's always about balancing up different protection versus allowing for natural systems to play out. If I had a fine mesh, then the bees couldn't pollinate my crops and I wouldn't have any strawberries to begin with. So because of that, what I always do is I grow decoy plants to distract the chickens from really wanting to get into the middle of the beds and get the things that I actually want for myself. And Alpine strawberries are fantastic for that, because if the chickens come and they get themselves a bonus little berry, then they're quite happy and they move on without wanting to get further in to try and get my big strawberries or my greens or whatever else I'm happening to grow in the garden. So I find them super, super useful for that. And the fact that I grow the white colored ones, the chickens are not primed to look for this color for food. So I actually have Alpine strawberries growing in different places that are completely unprotected, and the chickens will often not have seen the berries, so I can still get them for myself. They do know that these are food because I have probably by mistake given them to them, so they do identify this as something good to eat, but they don't seem to be able to pick them out on the bush, and neither can the wild birds. So that is a great reason to grow a different colored strawberry than just the red ones. Another aspect of my food production system is that I like to grow a lot of different kinds of plants together in one bed. So that's called having a diverse polyculture. And the reason I like to do that is because different plant species do different things in the soil. So they have roots that are at different depths, and the root exudates that they put out into the soil to feed the soil life are different depending on the species. So the more species of plants that you have in a location, the healthier your soil can be. So I try to do that, which is why in this strawberry patch, you will see that there are this is a bok choy that's growing, and I leave a few weeds that I do clear down, but I sort of leave them for a while and just whip them out over time and sort of just let it sort of shuffle through. And that's to get that diverse polyculture. Now, I didn't actually plant, except for the strawberries, any of these. They just popped out from seeds that were present in the soil from last season, and I just let them grow. And that's just a really easy way to really increase your soil health without having to think too much about it. And I put the garden strawberries in here with this wool mulch, which is a little bit of a difference for me this growing season, because usually I just sort of let things go crazy and knock the weeds down, but that was getting a little bit out of control. So the wool mulch is holding the chaos at bay, but I'm still letting some different things pop up that makes it a bit easier for me to manage them down. So that is where the Alpine strawberries come in, because they play nicely in the garden with other plants, especially if you get the kind that don't produce runners. So I like to grow a kind that clumps rather than spreads via runners, because then they stay where you put them and they don't take over ground at a rapid pace like strawberries that produce runners can do. Some Alpine strawberries do spread by runners, and they make an excellent ground cover, and I do have a variety that does do that I use for, well, holding space against weeds in certain areas, but they often do spread by clumping. And Alpine strawberries also come in red as well. I just happen to prefer to grow the white ones. So this is a clump that has been growing for a wee while, and I just pulled it out of the ground this morning to show you. So this is multiple plants in here, and to propagate them, so to spread them, to split them into different plants, you just come in and just gently work the separate little nodules of the plant out, and they're pretty tenacious. You don't have to be super gentle, and that's actually still more than one plant in there. And you just come in and gently take them apart, and then you've got a plant that you can just go and pop in a different spot, and over time they will start to build other plants around them that you can take apart and put in other areas, which I find a super, super easy way to just get these little strawberries growing everywhere, because as you have seen, they're not very big, so you do need quite a lot of them if you actually want to have any kind of measurable harvest. To me, the berries are just kind of a bonus that I can sort of snack on in the garden or grab to add some interest to a fruit salad or something like that, because they do taste different from the traditional red garden strawberries. So they don't really taste like a strawberry. They're sort of a bit more tropical, a bit pineapple-y is what I would say they taste like, and I really like them. But that is as easy as it gets. I just literally pulled this out of the ground this morning, and that's going to give me several plants that I can just go and pop out wherever I want to add another little section of Alpine strawberries. Super, super easy. I'm here in what was supposed to be my berry patch, but it didn't really go according to plan. Everything just kind of got wild and crazy here. So the only berry that I thought was going to stay here is my blackberry bush. However, when I came in and started clearing away just the chaos of grass and weeds that had taken over this area, I discovered that the Alpine strawberries, that these are ones that produce runners, so they make a good ground cover, that I had planted over 12 months ago, were still hanging on. There is still a patch of them that I couldn't even see them. I actually cut some of them away when I was weeding because I didn't realize they were still here. So they have survived through giant weeds way over the top of them, just doing their thing. And I've left them here now to see if they can keep holding their ground in this space. Now, I also had some garden strawberries, so those traditional red ones that grow these strawberries. I also had some of them growing in here and they just died. They couldn't keep up with the competition from the weeds, and that's fair. You know, these have been bred by humans to grow without that kind of competition. So these garden strawberries, these big red strawberries, are actually a relatively new crop. They've only been around since the 1700s, and they came about from a hybridization event between a strawberry, sort of like, I guess a more like woodland type strawberry from Chile, and a strawberry that was probably from Virginia, a woodland strawberry from Virginia, and that hybridized, and then we have developed them into these giant, big, red, hopefully delicious strawberries that we have today, which we call the garden strawberry. But before that, so before the 1700s, all strawberries were essentially these woodland alpine type strawberries. So any representations or references to strawberries in the literature before that time meant these little tiny, quite delicious strawberries that just grew wild in the woods, and so on and so forth. And of course, you've got the clumping kind, and you've got the one that make runners. But they were all just kind of like that. Strawberries weren't these giant, big, huge, delicious, fat berries that they are today. They were the little tiny white or red or yellow, lots of different colors strawberries that I grow as my borders. So that is pretty interesting and pretty cool that we've turned something into this when it used to be tiny and little. And those woodland strawberries, they're native to large amounts of the world. They are native to Asia and North America and South America and Europe. So they were everywhere for people to eat. But it wasn't until the 1700s where varieties from multiple places in the world could come together to give us what we traditionally think of as the strawberry today. I love growing Alpine strawberries. I think they are a super valuable addition to pretty much any garden. And you're bound to be able to find a version of this strawberry, whatever it happens to be called, mountain strawberry, Alpine strawberry, woodland strawberry, that you can also add into your food production system. They don't make a huge amount of large berries. Grow garden strawberries for that, but they're really happy to grow together in the same spaces. But just because a plant doesn't produce a huge amount of food for us, it doesn't mean it's not a super valuable addition to your food growing system. They can still contribute really awesome things, little snacks while you're out doing other tasks in the garden, holding space against the weeds, and allowing for a different root system in the ground to grow alongside the crops that you're growing for food. All of these things are super beneficial, kind of like keeping the older hens in your chicken flock, because they're adding value to the system even if they're not laying you lots of eggs. And I think it's important for us to value plants for the things they bring to the table, not just the things that we specifically want out of them.